capabilities in bringing them together. There was a lot of tribal wars, as we know, in the early days of Islam and prior to Islam. So, to make brotherhood between those who are fighting each other at a stage, this is something that is difficult. However, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's favors upon the Muslims, He made it easy. And that's of the most important things that the Prophet Muhammad began with. Now, for the reason that you find this is an important point to mention, any community that has a big masjid but there's no brotherhood or sisterhood, what's the benefit? There's no benefit. If the Muslims are at war with each other, there's no peace among them, there's no harmony. So you find the first thing that the Prophet Muhammad established among the Muslims was brotherhood. That they had love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, of the things that was mentioned, فَكَانُوا يَتَوَارَثُونَ بِهَذَا الْإِخَاءِ في ابتداء الإسلام إرثا مقدما على القرابة. Of the things that is mentioned, they used to inherit from each other based on this brotherhood, and they gave it precedence over any family ties, those blood relations.
Was that in general across all of Arabia, or just?
No, we only talk about Medina. Also, of the things that is mentioned. No, this isn't working. Also, of the things that is mentioned, يعني فرض الزكاة. The zakat was also obliged. I mentioned رفقا بفقراء المهاجرين, because many of the muhajirin, they were poor. Many of the muhajirin were poor. They left everything. Everything they left when they made hijrah to Medina. And we also mentioned some people gave all their wealth in exchange to be able to go to Medina. All their possessions, they left off everything, gave it to the kuffar of Quraysh to ransom themselves to be able to leave Mecca and be with the Muslims in Medina. So they're coming from Mecca to Medina with nothing. No homes, no provisions, no wealth, nothing. And that's also evidence of the virtue of the Ansar also in being of those who aided them and welcomed them and made things easier for them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission. And it's also a reminder for us when it comes to having Muslim communities, of the thing that's very important for us is to try and preserve brotherhood between the Muslim men and the Muslim women. And in doing so, sometimes you have to fight against those who strive to break that. And that's fighting with knowledge and admonishment, teaching them that which is correct, warning against evil behaviors and practices. People were unsure of when the salah would begin. So the things that were suggested, that someone blow in a horn, or Umar who proposed someone be directed to call out loudly prayers about to begin. And that's something that that's something the Prophet Muhammad was inclined towards. But he mentioned, and he put that into practice, but he mentioned Abdullah bin Zayd ibn Abdul Rabb al-Ansari had a dream in which he heard a beautiful call to the prayer. And he narrated this dream to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ acknowledged that this was a dream that was supposed to be fulfilled. And he asked Abdullah to teach the words of that dream to Bilal ibn Rabah, because he was known to have a strong and beautiful voice. Just as a benefit, when it comes to calling the adhan, we've mentioned things like this before, but there are common mistakes people make. Common mistakes that are made when people call the adhan. So we'll mention the adhan briefly, inshallah, and also address these common mistakes. So with the adhan, as we know at first, we say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. You say this takbir 4 times. You can say it separate like that, or you can say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. But you join it with dhamma on the ra. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Of the things that people make mistakes, say Allahu Akbar. They make it with a wow. Allahu Akbar, they join it. Allahu Akbar is Hamza. That's one of the first mistakes people make. So you say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. You don't have to prolong as well in a way that is beyond necessary. Okay? Yeah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Like this is fine. Then, it's also sunnah to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu Muhammad Rasulullah. Silently to yourself, quietly, and then you say it loud. A mistake people make in this part, we say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Some people, they say, Ashhadu. They put shadda on the sheen and not ashhadu. It's ha. Ashhadu. And they say an la. You merge it. Allah. Or some say ashhadu anna la. This is wrong as well. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And Allah's name, lafzul jalala, the lam is heavy. Allah. We don't say Allah, la. Some people, they say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. La, this is wrong. Okay. Ashhadu. Make sure you say the sheen with sukun. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Like this. In the next part, Ashhadu anna. Anna with shadda now. On the noon. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. You see? We don't say Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. You make idgham, you merge it. Okay? But the main thing I want you to focus on, the common mistake is, some people say ashhadu instead of ashhadu. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Like this. Okay? Hayya ala ghunna. Hayya ala salah. Like this. And salah, it ends in ta marbuta. When you stop, you say with ha or sukun. Okay? Then we have Hayya ala al-falah. Now it's falah with ha with sukun. Okay? So these are things that are important when you're making the adhan. Because some people, the way they call the adhan is how they've heard, not how they've actually learnt. Some people have never studied the wordings of the adhan. Okay, or actually looked at in the Arabic language, how is the adhan pronounced? And sometimes we copy famous mu'adhdinin, those who are famous to call the adhan, but it doesn't mean that they're always the best example of how to call the adhan. Because you find some people, they're prolonging things so long it's beyond necessary. Yeah, some people they say, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. لا, this is not a natural mad. هذا المد طبيعي. This is the natural mad. Is you prolong it with 2 seconds. Ilaha. Some people say ilaha. This is wrong as well. Naam. So, naam, Sheikh. No, you should, because it says Bilal, he had a beautiful voice. So it's good to beautify it, but not beyond that which is natural. So not doing Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. La, don't do all of this. Some people do too much. This is called a taklif. You're overburdening yourself. No? Simple. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. It's not too much. No? Natural med. But make sure you pay attention to أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. Not أشهد, لا. أشهد. Because a common mistake people make. You have to relax. Yeah, they don't say ha at all. They say أشهد, لا. That's wrong. You're not saying the adhan. Ashhadu means I bear witness. But if I ashhadu, this is not a word. It's not a word. So you have to, and the thing is one thing, ikhwan. Wallahi, be patient. If you have issues in pronunciation, be patient. If you are sincere, Allah is the one who teaches us. If you don't find your voice beautiful, I don't like my voice. But ask Allah. You ask Allah to give you a beautiful voice. You ask Allah to better your pronunciation. But if you are sincere, Allah will teach you. Allah will teach you. You see? But it's not, don't prolong things beyond that which is necessary. So we've said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. This is sufficient. No? And there's a nice audio, you can find it still, Sheikh Al-Bani rahimahullah, when he calls the adhan. Sheikh Al-Bani, Sheikh Muhammad Nasruddin Al-Albani, on YouTube, he has a video of him calling the adhan. Not to Ashhadu, things because they're doing too much. They're not relaxing. They're doing too much. They're not relaxing. Now, so these are important things to mention when it comes to the adhan. Those are common mistakes people make in the pronunciation. Okay. When of the things that's also mentioned, when Umar radiallahu anhu heard the adhan and the call to salah, he hurried to the masjid and he said, by Allah, I've heard this call in my dreams. He heard that call in his dreams. And the Muslims, they all gathered to the masjid when they heard Bilal make the adhan, the call to prayer. So we also learn from this, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the revelation of the Sharia also came in the dreams of others. And it was approved of by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, based on revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. But if anyone claims that today they've had a dream, today we should pray Qiyam al-Layl, ikhwan. I saw in my dream, the prophets, they came and they prayed with us in this masjid. So tonight we do Qiyam al-Layl. What do you say about this to this person? هذا الشيطان جاءك. جاءك الشيطان. Shaitan came to you and said, do this. This is not the way we take our Islam. Our Islam is built upon the Quran and the Sunnah, the understanding of the Sahaba, those who learnt from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and lived the revelation. Now, so that was of the things that also occurred during that time. Also in reference to the Ansar and their love for the Muslims, especially the Muhajirin, Allah mentions about them, يحبون من هاجر إليهم ولا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا ويؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة ومن يوق شح نفسه فأولئك هم المفلحون. This is a beautiful characteristics of the Ansar. They love those who made hijrah to them, those who came to them from Mecca seeking refuge among the Muslims of Medina. They love them, and they don't find within themselves any jealousy in their hearts. Nothing. They had no ill feeling towards the Muhajirun. How many today, the Muslims, they have ill feeling towards other Muslims? Especially within the circles of knowledge. And most cases, when you look for the cause of why they have those ill feelings towards those Muslims, is because of jealousy, envy, and these evil characteristics that a person should try and rid from themselves. Now, as for the Ansar, they didn't say, oh, but these ones, they're better than us. We can't. They love them for the sake of who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in their love for them, Allah elevated them, raised their rank. Naam. And it mentions, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةً. They give preference to others over themselves, even if they are in need. Even if they are in need. You hear narrations of those who are married to more than one wife, and the Muhajirun not married. They say, choose one of my wives. That's the level of Iman that they had. Naam. All for the sake of who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Naam. And it's just the mentality that we're highlighting. The mentality that they had. They weren't anani, ana. Today, you ask Muslims to do something, to be involved in, that they think about first is, I benefit from it. For me, there are so much disease of the heart that we find today that were not at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Sahaba weren't affected by these illnesses. From them is ujub bin nafs, self-amazement. Also from them is wanting to be the center of attention all the time. If it's not about you, you'll behave to make it about you. And sometimes that behavior that is done is negative behavior. It's not something praiseworthy. They seek attention through negative means. This is a major problem. Now, also, of the things that is mentioned, there were a number of things that were made as an agreement in the treaties that we mentioned before with the Jews. Of the things that was mentioned, the payment of blood money and the release of prisoners between them and the Muslims would take place according to the past practice. And the two non-Muslim communities of Medina would help the Muslims in matters of ransom and blood money. That was the first thing that was mentioned. All three communities of Medina would unite against any criminals, rebels, hostile armies, even if they should be their own offspring. So they would come together to preserve security. No Muslim was allowed to kill another Muslim or to aid a non-Muslim, like in killing another Muslim in order to aid a non-Muslim. هذا لا يجوز. وهذا من كفر نواقض الإسلام. نعم. To aid a non-Muslim against the Muslims, this is of the things that will nullify your Islam. Unless it's with the haqq. Unless it's with the haqq. If the Muslim's oppression is a tyrant, then you have a duty to stop him from oppression. And that may also be a means of da'wah to the non-Muslim. That they see that you stand for that which is correct. Naam. Also, the obligations owed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were upon all Muslims. Naam. And the whole community, it was responsible for discharging these duties if an individual failed to carry out his responsibility. So again, this was the enjoining of good and forbidding the evil. It's a communal obligation to make sure things are done as they're supposed to be done. The rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are to be preserved. Jews who became Muslim would be treated as any other Muslim. You wouldn't treat them saying, oh, you used to be Yahudi, and treat them a certain way. La. Anyone who was Muslim was treated with the rights of Islam, regardless of your background. War booty would be shared with all Muslims. One who deliberately killed a Muslim would be killed unless the victim's family forgave the killer. And it was upon all the Muslims to rise against the one who's the murderer. And this is qisas. So as you can see, the rulings start to come into play in Medina. That was where the Muslims started to gain strength and establishment, have a society. So now the rules that govern the Muslims started to come into play. Also was mentioned, it was unlawful to support division among the Muslims. If you have any disputes in anything, then we go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. So anytime we have the common dispute, oh, this is bid'ah, this is innovation. A person wants to argue the case, said, Tayyib, give me your evidence. Give me your evidence. The easiest way to deal with the people of innovation. We asked them, did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ do this? No. Tayyib, did he know it? Ask them, did he know it? They say no. Then how are you doing something the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't know himself? If they say yes, and he didn't convey it to us, this is kufr. This is major kufr. Don't waste time arguing with people like this. If a person brings anything that was not from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, we reject it. We reject it. When it comes to acts of worship. As for worldly affairs, then if a person wants to say something's not allowed, they have to bring evidence for it. But as for acts of worship, then you have to have evidence. And it's not upon the one who warns you from it to give you evidence, it's upon the one who wants to do it to produce the evidence. So always remember that. Because someone says, well, you prove me that it's wrong. La, I don't have to do that. You have to prove that it's correct. That's your duty, to prove that it's permissible to be done, that it's from Islam. And unfortunately, because people don't understand these principles, they get upset. And in their feelings, when you try to teach them that which is correct. Of the things that's mentioned is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had drew up a separate contract or an agreement with the Jews that consisted of matters such as the Jews and the Muslims would live together as two separate nations, each with his own way of life and each in charge of his own financial affairs. Both nations would jointly defend the city from attack and each would defend his own people. Both nations would coexist peacefully. Neither was to meddle in the affairs of the other or attempt to destabilize the other. Neither nation was responsible for the misdeeds of the other. The oppressed would be helped and supported. Both nations would bear the expense of war, and subversion and any unwarranted bloodshed were unlawful for both the Jews and the Muslims. All disputes will be referred to Allah and His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quraysh and the allies were not to be aided or given refuge, and the covenant would not provide any safeguard to wrongdoers or criminals. What we learn from this in a practical reality of life today as well, any society without proper governance and a proper system is going to be fawda. It's going to be chaos. And look at Croydon, for example. Croydon itself is the biggest example of chaos now. Because it's misgoverned, neglected. It's one of the worst places to walk. And unfortunately, even when we see the Muslims or those who are from Muslim backgrounds attribute themselves to Islam that have come for refuge, there's a major difference between those who are people of the masjid, those who uphold Islam, and those who are people of the street. They may wear Islamic attire, but they don't represent Islam. But you see, nothing is being right. The crazy knife killing, knife possession, where's the deterrent? This government closed down nearly all youth clubs and funding for youth services for 8 years. And then after doing that, started to cry, saying, what do we do? So it's like me setting a fire and then crying, saying, how do I put it out? But I set it up. I'm the one who set a blaze. And then I'm crying, saying, how do I put out the fire? I got the firewood, I got the gas, I set that fire. Then after I saw the damage, I started to cry and say, how do I fix it? It's chaos now. No deterrence. from the crimes that these youth, and not even youth, adults, everyone's committing. But from the earliest days of Islam, from Medina, you found the Sharia. When Allah legislated the Islamic Sharia law, it was in the interest of everyone. It was in everyone's interest. So now, for example, one of the big crimes that we have is people stealing expensive watches. People stealing expensive watches. Watches that people will spend hundreds of thousands on sometimes. I guarantee if we asked that person whose watch was stolen, what would you think if that person who got caught, their hand was chopped off so they can't wear the watch? They'll say, yeah, straight away, do it. Okay, sometimes we focus so much on the idea of someone not having an arm, a hand, yes? That we forget to pay attention to if people knew that if I go stealing people's watches or just anything else that doesn't belong to me, because now we have the other one, people are stealing phones. Crazy amounts of phones are being stolen. And they're always on electric bikes, mopeds. Don't be negligent when you're just looking at your phone, walking. Someone's preparing to snatch it from you. Waiting for an opportunity to take your phone. This is happening in abundance. But if they knew, if they get caught, their hand is gone, how many of them are going to keep doing this? But then, oh, it's barbaric. It's barbaric until it happens to you. You see, we've learned from this country for the longest time this false ideology that they are humanitarians and they believe in human rights because they consider everyone but the Muslims to be human. Wallahu musta'an. Even in the Olympics now, what are you seeing? Women having to compete in physical combat against someone who was born a man. Because they claim that halfway down their life, there was a mistake. And they want to be a woman. So they want to go and fight women now. Allah musta'an. In the natural world, this will be domestics. Now it's permissible for a man to beat up a woman in the name of sport. That's why we learn things that they encourage. Allah musta'an. Does it make sense? If we ponder on the history of Islam, when these laws were put in place, these legislations were put in place, how many people did it happen to? Very little. Very little. And in Islam, the rules apply to everyone. As long as the conditions are fulfilled, you're caught with 4 witnesses, khalas, that's it. The law applies to everyone. But as we see in these lands, and in America and the likes, what happens? Different races commit the same crimes, they don't serve the same times. Different races committing exactly the same crimes, and they're not serving the same time. Or different races doing worse than other races of ethnic minorities and still doing less of a punishment. I know of the things you saw recently, the woman that called police herself and she was murdered in her house. Murdered in her own house. Al-qasas, a life for a life. A life for a life. Or if you're forgiven, you pay blood money. You see. So when we actually ponder on the governance of Islam, the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah created mankind. Who knows what's better for mankind than the one who created them? No one. No one. But unfortunately, this is the dilemma we're in today. And these are the things that we have to teach people, the merits of Islam. Because one thing you'll see in the Muslim lands, even in the poorest of them, there is security. There is security. There is safety. The harm comes from the foreigners, those who are not upon Islam, that come to the countries and bring about evil. In Medina, I was in Medina not long ago, and I was like 3 o'clock in the morning before Fajr, and the youth, 3-4 years old, they're outside the masjid playing football, running around. Their parents are praying Qiyam al-Layl, and no one's like, oh, where's my child, where's my child? Safety. Here you can't send your child to the shop without being scared. See the difference? No security. Even when I lived in Morocco, my neighbor, this kid was only 4 years old at that time. I used to hear him, I'm going to sleep for school, and this guy's coming home at midnight. Mama Wafa! Iftah al-bab! Like this. Calling his mom, say, open the door. He's only 4. He goes shop, everything. You see? They get to live. Here, no chance. Can you imagine seeing a child outside at 7 in the evening by themselves? Under 5? Going to the shop? Police? Social services, immediately. Because there's no security here. None. No safety. And that's what we have to show and teach them. We have to be the best examples. Because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when he came to Medina with the Muhajirin, he made sure the situation was for the best of everyone. That those who didn't believe from the Yahud is because they were stubborn upon their kufr. But those who knew what was best for them and had sincerity within themselves, Allah knows what's in the hearts of man. Allah guides the broadcast of the masjid from the admin, inshallah, to keep up to date with whether class is cancelled or not, because there's going to be some scholarly visits. When they're local in London, as I mentioned, I won't be doing lessons, inshallah. I encourage people to try and go and benefit sitting with the scholars, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So we stop there. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala nabiyyina wa habibina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa iyyak.